Hey guys, how's it going? Hope you're doing well. My name is Crown, and today I'm going to read you some very interesting stories that I hope that you're gonna love. And now, without further ado, let's go! Background: I was a squad leader in charge of 9 humanoids at the time. We had semi-recently returned from a deployment from arguably the worst neighborhood in Baghdad, Iraq. I had received Aaron a couple months prior to the deployment. He performed superbly during airborne operations, field training exercises, and live fire exercises. The kid was great, away or confined from civilization. However, Aaron was nothing but trouble when he was free to his own devices. We had a surprise urinalysis during one of our training exercises, and guess who pissed hot? Aaron. He was a stellar soldier though, and the entire organization fought to keep him due to the upcoming deployment. Maybe we could change him? Iraq. The deployment was 15 months long, longer than any other deployment I have been on before. There was a 2-week rest and recuperation leave vacation for each soldier during the deployment due to the length. We decided who and when would go on vacation early in the deployment. We had planned for Aaron to go towards the later half of the deployment in hopes of him maturing as a soldier and human. 10 months later, it was time. Aaron seemed like he had turned the corner and started to mature. He was no longer a breaking case of war-only soldier. His team leader, direct supervisor, myself, and a platoon sergeant in charge of 42 humanoids had sat Aaron down and counseled him on our expectations. You see, Aaron had compiled a stack of cash due to the deployment. He was making more than $3,000 a month, and also re-enlisted and received a $20,000 tax-free bonus due to deployment. The kid was sitting on $50,000. We knew it, and boy did he know too. Some background about Aaron. He was raised by his mother and they were literally very poor. Running water was not a thing at his house. He grew up in the backwoods of North Carolina and Tennessee. His father was only sporadically in the picture. The army was the only thing going for him. Now this kid had money, lots of it, and we were about to set him free into the world for 2 weeks. This kid was let off the leash for 2 weeks. 2 weeks! Much to our surprise, he wasn't arrested, or at least he wasn't caught breaking any laws. However, he had some stories to tell when he returned. Aaron reconnected with his father. Aaron met the love of his life. Aaron bought his dad a truck. Aaron bought himself a truck. Aaron bought himself a 4-wheeler. Aaron bought his dad a gun. Aaron bought himself a gun. Aaron is broke again. No worries though, we semi-expected this to happen. At least the kid was on the leash again. Maybe we can work the crazy out of this kid over the next 5 months? Redeployment. We return home and return to our normal army lives. Months go by and we have no issues with Aaron. Then we have another urinalysis. There is no reason to expect anything and Aaron is acting normal. We casually joke around about the last urinalysis and he exclaims that he is a changed man. Good. The next day at work, Aaron is late. At least we think he is late. We ask his friends but nobody knows where he is. Now Aaron is unaccounted for with a failure to report. We continue to ask his closest friends if there is anything we should know. Nick, his closest friend, informs us that he just received a text in which Aaron stated, "Screw the army, I am not coming back." Great. Now this guy is absent without leave. This is just a giant hassle now. There are certain things we have to do in this situation, such as clear his room. The first sergeant, big boss, and the entire platoon leadership go to Aaron's room to inventory the remaining positions, put them in storage, and prepare the room for future soldiers. This is typically a mundane process. Not Aaron's room though. This kid was an odd cat. Evidently, he only packed the essentials during his hurry to quit the army. This list of things found in his room went something like this: Xbox, PlayStation, camera, fridge full of what I assume to be clean urine specimen, a lot of inappropriate objects, leather things more than anyone should ever own, and so much alcohol. This list goes on and on with numerous things findings didn't expect. Month pass. We are now doing expert infantry badge testing, large hands-on testing for some shiny metal, and I have my crew of 3 soldiers. We get on the topic of Aaron during breaks and in between, testing candidates. Not only did Aaron hassle us with his departure from the army, but he sent emails to the leadership embellishing war stories and did outline about events. The kid wasn't even in the army anymore, but he was still making our lives difficult. I wanted revenge. We wanted revenge. Out of nowhere, Nick, the soldier, informs us that Aaron still talks to him via text. What? That's great. Where is he? What is he doing? Have you seen him? We need to learn more. We coach Nick into finding out where he is. Start slow. Don't make it too overt. It took 3 weeks of coaching to finally get them to link up together. They met in a random town in North Carolina. Aaron didn't want Nick to know where he lived yet. Fine by us. We continued to orchestrate meetings in neutral locations until Nick is trusted enough to spend the weekend at Aaron's place in Charlotte, North Carolina. Great. We have an address now. Then Nick drops a bomb on us. Aaron lives with his dad and he's real deep in the family business. You see, he reconnected with his father because his father had just been paroled. His father became a self-made man after that. Aaron and his father were doing well for themselves financially. The family business venture? Yeah, it was meth. Nick stated that he never wanted to go back to Aaron's house again. He lived on a cul-de-sac in a not-so-good part of town. One would assume that neighbors would not be too keen on having a meth house in the neighborhood. But the neighbors were mostly customers, so it worked out. The house was full of meth heads, needles, junky chaos. What did we do? What any good citizen would do. I called the Charlotte Police Department and informed them in great detail of our little situation. I wanted Aaron to pay for his mistakes, the lies he told and the hassle he put the organization through, especially after we fought for him. The plan. We didn't want Nick at the house. Didn't want him getting mixed up or worse during the raid. Our idea was to have Nick meet Aaron at Dave & Buster's. It's a restaurant and arcade, and the Charlotte Police Department would detain him at Dave & Buster's and eventually turn him over to us, the army. The plan worked incredibly and the police were happy to oblige. They went the whole 9 yards to help out. We, army peeps and plainclothes cops, parked outside Dave & Buster's and allowed Aaron to enjoy his last meal as a free man. While we sat and exchanged war stories and Aaron ate, the narcotics unit was raiding Aaron's house. They were not too happy about the family business. Felons are not supposed to cook meth or have firearms. His father was cuffed and stuffed. We were not done yet. We wanted to twist the knife. Aaron was greeted by 4 plainclothes cops after paying the bill. The look on his face was priceless. It became more priceless when he saw his old workmates and knew we set him up. The icing on the cake. The narcotics unit brought his father to Dave & Buster's so they could ride in the same car, the patrol car that would take them both to jail. I hope he enjoyed bonding with his father. The Charlotte police charged him and his father with numerous felony charges. We were finally able to get him off our books with a court-martial and dishonorable discharge, and they both went to jail. Screw you, Aaron. It was just another ordinary day when Karen decided to ruin everything. As I pulled into the grocery store parking lot, I couldn't help but feel a sense of pride as I gazed at my shiny new SUV. I had worked hard for this car, and it was a symbol of all of my hard work and dedication. But as I was getting my infant daughter out of the backseat, I was suddenly interrupted by a loud and entitled voice. "Oh my goodness, what a beautiful car!" Karen gushed as she approached me. "I just love SUVs, they are so practical. How lucky are you to be able to afford something like that?" I forced a polite smile and tried to deflect the conversation, but Karen was relentless. She kept asking me questions about my job and how I was able to afford such a luxurious car. I could tell she was just trying to make herself feel better about her own older, less impressive vehicle. I was getting increasingly uncomfortable and just wanted to finish my shopping and go home. But Karen had other ideas. She started demanding that I sell her the car, and even tried to bargain with me on the spot. When I refused, she became more and more aggressive, insisting that I give her the car out of the kindness of my heart. I was starting to feel scared and trapped, with my infant daughter still in the car and Karen acting more and more crazy. I tried to reason with her and told her that she needed to calm down, but she just laughed and called me mad. That's when things took a turn for the worse. Karen suddenly shoved me to the ground and jumped into my car, revving the engine. I screamed and chased after her, frantically trying to get my daughter out of the car. But Karen just laughed and sped off, leaving me behind in the parking lot. I was in a panic, not knowing what to do, but then a miracle happened. As Karen was driving off with my car and my child inside, the engine suddenly shut off. It was a feature of my car that I had never even thought to use before. It was a feature of my car that I had never even thought that it would be of benefit to me before. But it had just saved my daughter's life. I ran to the car and yanked the door open, pulling Karen out by the hair and slapping her hard across the face. She was too stunned to fight back and just sat there dazed and confused. By this point, several witnesses had called the police and they arrived just in time to see me attacking Karen. They quickly separated us and arrested Karen on charges of theft and assault. Add to that the attempted kidnapping of my infant daughter, and you have yourself a solid case. But thanks to my quick thinking and the advanced features of my car, justice was finally served and Karen was given a hefty punishment for her crimes. She was sentenced to 5 years in prison and was ordered to pay a fine of $50,000. I learned a valuable lesson that day. Never underestimate the power of resilience of a strong, independent woman, especially when she is protecting her child. And I also learned to be always grateful for the things I have, because you never know when someone like Karen might try to take them away. From now on, I vow to never let anyone make me feel small or powerless again. Oh, and by the way, thankfully my daughter was completely fine during this whole ordeal. I didn't go bananas on Karen until I glanced over at her and saw her sleeping in the backseat exactly how I left her. So grateful that she was okay. Old story, but in 2007, I was involved in a traffic accident on the I-95 I-695 ramp in Baltimore. Traffic went from the speed limit 55 miles per hour to a dead stop around the curve of the exit in a space of 500 feet, and it had just started raining. I and my Honda Accord managed to stop literal inches from the person in front of me's bumper. I had enough time to have half a sigh of relief before I was rear-ended so hard that the can of tea in my waist-level console cup holder wound up splattered all over the windshield. I get out of my car and the person who hit me is literally crying blood. She's driving a Saturn that is at least a decade old, and the ancient airbag broke her nose and plagued both of her eyes. She's also crying for real because this is her only transportation. I go heck. Grab an umbrella out of my now weirdly shaped backseat and hold it over her while she sobs. Explains her brakes have been locking up lately and she was literally on her way to the mechanics, and tries to text her boyfriend to pick her up. She's crying so hard that she drops her phone twice. And then a cop shows up. Baltimore cops are jerks. So he writes this girl a ticket about failure to control speed to avoid an accident, and also reckless endangerment, and half a dozen other nonsense things to where the ticket would literally cost more than a new car, and she might get her license revoked and/or jail time. She's hysterical. I talk to her, reassure her it's not her fault, and managed to swap insurance information. Fast forward 2 months, I had mild whiplash, but I'm healed up and mostly good regarding the accident. Have a new car and everything, and I get a notice in the mail that I'm requested to be a witness for this poor girl's trial for her ticket. Don't have to show, but it would be nice. Screw it if I'm gonna let that cop roast her. I was asked, so I'm taking a day off work to show up. I turned up in court dressed in my civil servant best. Was working for the state government at the time. So however state you imagine, multiply by 3. And even toss on some makeup to impress the judge. I wait 3 hours for her hearing because hell if I'm going to accidentally be late. The cop goes first, making up a bunch of nonsense about how recklessly she was driving to have hit me in an accident he was probably 10 miles away from witnessing from his response time. Then the judge calls me and I stand up. Cop looked at this with a very shocked expression like, he didn't expect me to show. The poor girl was already crying and started crying more. So I get to the stand, get sworn in, and tell the truth. The whole truth and nothing but the truth. So that day we were going exactly the speed limit. I know because I checked my speedometer and surprised that there wasn't more traffic. That she was following a proper distance behind me because I checked my rearview mirror and she was a ways off. It had just started raining after a dry week. So the road was so greasy and I knew that because I'd almost slid into the car in front of me. Only saved by my car's APS. That her wheels had locked because I'd heard the screech and seen the skid marks. And that she definitely wasn't at fault because she was on her way to get her car's old APS fixed. And I mentioned that the cop didn't show up until 20 minutes later. I know this sounds like an everyone clapped moment, but the judge did thank me for doing my civic duty and turning up. And I got a quick hug from the poor girl after the judge dismissed her charges. Anyway, Baltimore cops are jerks, and if you can turn up in court to fight a traffic ticket, even someone else's, you should do so. Background: I'm a quite young guy, now 23, and started a small company with a few friends, about the same age. We had some common interest in IT-related work, so we decided to make it official. But for us, it is more a hobby than a job. We just generate enough revenue to be at the $0 mark end of year, working weekends/evenings mostly, as we all are employed in our main jobs and earn quite well despite our age. No conflict of interest. I have a neighbor. I'm living with my parents in a small village in the countryside that manages a small non-profit youth club out of his own pocket mainly for school children to hang out on Fridays evening with her colleagues and enjoying some music and party. A room probably around 100 meters square in the school building, fitted with a small bar, lights, DJ equipment, 2KWPA system and so on. I was helping him out to manage this youth club when I was at school, and from then on, we would rent out the equipment and offer DJing services for birthday parties, weddings, school concerts, and so on for quite cheap prices. The main story: through some colleagues of my neighbor, we got offered a gig to rent out equipment and offer DJing services in a restaurant. We met with the restaurant owner and got some backstory about the restaurant and him. The location of the restaurant struggled hard the last few years, as it's quite remote in the countryside. The owner doesn't have much experience in running such a restaurant, nor anything to do with running a business. He was before a normal office worker. Don't quite remember what exactly though. And at some point thought he could earn money with his restaurant. He rented it for quite a high price, was serving mainly food and some basic drinks. He started with that about 3 months prior. The interior of the restaurant was quite old, and not a lot of effort was put in to make it attractive for anyone wanting to come there. Kitchen wasn't quite up to standards. They are quite high in the country I live. The food was basically frozen and just heated up on demand. The chef in the kitchen wasn't a real chef, and the owner was losing quite some money from running this restaurant. The owner planned to organize musical events every weekend to get more customers into the restaurant. Some weekends, the owner had some small one-man bands organized. Another, we were planned for DJing and so on. My neighbor and I decided to give it a try for some time and set our price. It was quite low, probably about $150 a weekend, with 2 people working 6 hours 2 evenings. No big problem about the price, as it's also more of a hobby and not income. After a few weeks of doing this, probably about 10 people, max probably 20, were their average a day on weekends. That's not a lot. The restaurant had space for 100 seats and definitely didn't cover costs. The owner approached me after some time to ask if my own company would be interested in creating a website for said restaurant and running some advertisement on Facebook and Instagram. I agreed, why not? We haven't done such a thing so far, and we are willing to learn what we need to do. Of course, letting him sign a small contract. In about 2 hours, I had set up a small WordPress site with a menu, some pictures and so on, and hosted the site for him. For the advertisement, I required prepayment of the amount the owner wanted to invest into it, just for safety. Total of this job was probably around $500, $100 for ads already paid, but then when we sent him an invoice, he mentioned that he had difficulties with paying it. I agreed to a payment of $200, and the rest can be paid over time by the owner. At some point, we heard that the owner actually lent out $50,000 from the chef he hired. He didn't get paid for working there, to help pay the bills. Even the one waitress working there hasn't been paid since she started working there. Also, the payments for our gigs were getting delayed for some time by the owner. A bit concerned about this, my neighbor and I continued with the gigs, knowingly that we probably won't get paid. One evening, the owner approached me again to ask if I, in the name of my own company, can help out with some technical stuff at his home. Sure I did. Prepay $40 an hour, still very cheap, for setting up some email, fixing some printer issues and so on at his flat. When I saw the owner's desk, I was blown away from what I saw there all around. Hundreds of unpaid invoices, bills, reminders, including third reminder to pay some bills and so on. That weren't small things. For example, reminders for rent of restaurant and his own flat, internet, mobile phones, even federal reminders. I finished the job, went to my neighbor to tell him what I had seen in the owner's flat. After that, my neighbor and I decided to decline any further gigs that were planned. And I, in the name of my own company, declined any further work for the restaurant owner requests and sent some reminders for our still open invoices, around $200. We didn't get any money from the owner after that, but it wasn't hurting too much, as it was just some free time I spent to create the website. After some time, I took the website and email server offline for the restaurant. And then comes a real revenge. I and my neighbor did some further investigation on the restaurant owner and found quite some interesting things. The owner had tried to run 2 restaurants before, but failed miserably and had to file for bankruptcy. The owner hadn't registered the current restaurant as business. He doesn't have a license to sell alcohol in a restaurant, and some other details. We also had some talks with the chef of his restaurant that lent the owner those $50,000, and we advised him to ask for his money back from the owner and take legal advice and go to court for claiming his money because otherwise it may be gone completely, if not already. With that advice, we started to write some anonymous reports to federal administration, tax office, trade office, health department, employment exchange and so on. And then we waited. A few days later it started. Different departments were inspecting and searching his restaurant and of course had to close it. Searched his flat for files about illegal business, questioned the chef and waitress, and finally the owner got arrested. I couldn't really follow up with what actually happened after that with the owner because of the anonymous tips, and I was away from real life for a year. Military service. I only know that his wife left him. Some money was paid back to the chef and the waitress from his retirement funds, and I think the owner ended up in jail for some years, but not sure for how long. And now we have reached the end of today's stories. Thank you for watching and see you next time.